Good morning and welcome to another episode of Bold Business. I'm David Grasso from Gen FKD, a nonprofit dedicated to helping millennials navigate the new economy. Joining us for another wonderful show is Morgan Ortegas.
Good morning.
We're distantly related. Your last name is essentially my mother's last name.
That's really, well, actually, because we're from Florida, we probably are related somehow. We're cousins, for sure.
There's two Floridians right here from neighboring counties. Of course, first, let's introduce Morgan. You might know her from past episodes. She's a financial intelligence expert, former diplomat, and a national security analyst. You got a lot of information in that noggin, don't you, Morgan?
Do you know who I'm trying to mimic today?
Who are you channeling?
Did you see Melania Trump when she got off the plane yesterday from Ohio?
I'm not keeping up with the paparazzi.
Oh my God, she looked amazing. She had on this yellow turtleneck and this brown leather skirt, and then this bright yellow jacket that went on top of it. So I was inspired this morning and found my yellow.
Well, we appreciate your inspiration as always. You're looking very fancy.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So let's start off with something funny before we get into the headlines. I'd like to start with an image that the CEO of Bold TV, Carrie Sheffield, found that reads, "I'm so glad I learned about parallelograms instead of how to do taxes." It's really going to come in handy this parallelogram season. So Morgan, have you started doing your taxes?
I don't do my taxes. I mean, I pay them.
Use your words wisely. The government's watching, right?
No, I pay my taxes. My husband takes care of it. And I know that's so 1950s of me, but I love not having to do it. We have a really good accountant, a family accountant that everyone's used, and I just give him all my stuff. And yeah.
Well, my partner has that deal with me, so I'm on the wrong side of that equation. But
Oh, yeah. But I do, yeah. I mean, we're getting close to the deadline.
Absolutely. I've already started doing the worksheet. Have you done this and done that? But what's funny is the new tax law affects this year, but not last year. So we're still under the old regime doing our taxes for 2017.
It will be interesting because I think a lot of people think tax reform, that it's headed for this year. But as you said, old laws. But, I think the more that the government can continue to make taxes simpler, the better for all Americans.
Yeah, hopefully. Well, let's hope the new regime is a lot more simple, and it sure seems that way at first glance. So our first headline takes us to a more serious topic, the stock market plunge. Today, some are expecting further declines around the world. Of course, there's already been $4 trillion in value erased.
Yesterday was the scariest day on Wall Street in a year when stocks fell into a free fall, ending the Dow plunging more than 1,000 points. This is the biggest point decline in history. During a trading day, even though buyers limited the damage, the Dow was still down 1,175 points by the close. The CEO of wealth management firm Zoe Financial stresses that nothing has really changed from a fundamental standpoint. This plunge leaves many concerned, though. Do you think that the U.S. is on track for another recession based off this stock market plunge yesterday?
I don't know. I mean, I think it was going up too fast.
Yeah, it was.
And it was due for a little cool off. And in fact, to me, and I guess I'm a weird guy among the bunch, but I think that this was kind of a sign of relief for me. I think going up 1,000 points in such a short period of time, and then of course going down 1,000 points, are some scary moves. Sure. But I think it's better to take a little bit of the heat off of expectations and whatnot.
I agree with you. I think the market was due for a correction. I mean, one of the crazy things about the stock market is we can sit here and pontificate on, was it interest rates? Was it concerns about the debt? Was it, concerns about political instability? I mean, there's so many factors that go into this, but I think largely most economists think that valuations are a bit high. But overall, I think the talk of a recession is incredibly premature. I mean, we have very low interest rates. Excuse me, very low unemployment is what I was going to say, and
very low interest rates. You're not wrong.
But the major signs of the economy are incredibly strong. And so one thing about the stock market is you live and die by it.
Of course, and we're getting some audience comments. No panic, the economy's in good shape, and I would tend to agree with that analysis. Yeah, there's a little bit of a divorce between the stock market and the real economy.
In fact, I was reading a statistic this morning, and I could look it up. It was either 27, 29% M&A activity up just last year alone. I mean, I do feel a sense since the tax reform that it was sort of a shot in the arm to many people. They're looking to do more deals. They're looking at
mergers,
and not just big corporations. And I mean, I think regular regular people that I encounter, there's an excitement about doing business.
Okay, let's rush through the rest of our headlines. Our next headline focuses on the effects of smartphones and social networking. Early employees of Google and Facebook have banded together and are planning an anti-tech addiction lobbying effort, as well as an ad campaign at 55,000 public schools across the United States.
Wow, the campaign will be funded with $7 million from the nonprofit media watchdog Common Sense Media, along with capital raised by the Center for Humane Technology. That sounds like an interesting center. It will be aimed at educating students, parents, and teachers about the dangers of technology, including possible side effects from heavy use of social media. Do you think technology is dangerous? We talk about this a lot on the show.
It's funny how people who helped get Google and Facebook on the map now have regrets. So that's very interesting.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of Google and Facebook, though.
I think, like, here's something really fun. I saw Come From Away on Saturday night, which anybody when you're in New York City, you have to see it. And with one of my friends that's there, said her 90-year-old mother saw the pictures on Facebook and called and said, "Oh, I see you're at the theater." And I thought that was really cute, like a 90-year-old woman is keeping up with her 70-year-old daughter. I thought it was pretty hysterical.
Well, we're running out of time, so let's get to our next headline, and it's about the Wells Fargo scandal. So, if you weren't keeping up with this, to make sure everyone is caught up to date, Wells Fargo was recently fined $185 million for opening customer accounts without the customer's permission. The financial services company was caught in the act when they cleaned house, firing more than 5,000 employees after forcing them to commit fraud in order to make sales targets. And now the Federal Reserve is forcing changes on the board of directors. Well, some people see this as heavy-handed. Others say it's about time the government acted. Many people believe that if the banks slip up, they should be held accountable. Good or bad, the Federal Reserve cleaned out their board of directors.
Well, interestingly, they did this on the last day of Janet Yellen being in office.
Who was the Fed chairman.
It was the last Fed chairman. This was a big action to take on her last day. I mean, a lot of people go quietly into the night. She went out with a bang. Now we have Jerome Powell, and so we'll see if the Fed will continue in this sort of aggressive stance towards the banks.
I think they should be held accountable. Opening accounts without my permission in my name is a pretty bad crime. Our last headline comes from the Federal Trade Commission and covers online dating scams, or what we millennials call catfishing.
Thank God I don't have to deal with it.
Neither do I. This infographic showcases the ways to know you are caught in a scam and how to get out of it. Oh, wait, we got global extreme poverty up. That was a great infographic, but we don't have time for that. So keep on going. This infographic showcases how to know you're in a scam. So, has a love interest asked you for money? That's a scam.
Oh, well, I mean, isn't that obvious?
Yeah. Professes love quickly, claims to be from the U.S. but is overseas, asks for money and lures you off the dating site. We need money for an emergency hospital bill or travel, etc. Keep on scrolling through that. So what to do? Slow down, don't wire money, contact your bank right away and report your experience.
Yeah, if you're on like Tinder and someone says like, give me $100 for a date, that's a bad sign.
I mean, a bad way to start out a relationship.
I've never online dated. Have you?
Of course.
Well, I've been with my husband. I mean, we haven't been married for 11 years, but we were together for 11 years. So, I mean, 11 years ago, only losers were dating online.
Morgan!
I'm saying not long ago. Now everyone does it.
Online dating has been normalized. For the record, I met my partner in real life, but that's a rarity. Now we're in the minority.
That is a rarity.
And I feel like different strokes for different folks, Morgan.
That's true. I have nothing against it. I think it's great.
Well, it's like the cloud above our head. At this point, everyone's online dating, so what are we going to do about it?
So our first guest, yay, we have someone new here today, is a cultural anthropologist and strategist. That is like the most interesting title ever. His name is Philip McKenzie. He is here to speak about BlackRock CEO Larry Fink's recent letter titled A Sense of Purpose. Welcome to the show, Philip. I'm so excited that you're here to talk about this because this really made waves in the financial news markets.
It did.
When the CEO sent this. And I thought... I want to hear what you think, but I thought this was a great example of the private sector leading on conscious capitalism and on areas of morality, actually, when it comes to business. But let's hear what you think.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Mr. Fink's letter was basically one that the industry has needed for a long time. Mm-hmm. And it's also the messenger. You know, BlackRock is a tremendous firm with well over $1 trillion in assets that they manage. They're well known within the industry as having a fairly sterling reputation. They do a ton of amazing work. So having their CEO come out and make this really call out to the darkness I think was really significant toward changing the culture of what we think of as doing business in a modern way.
I mean, I think there's an overly focus on the quarterly report, and that's exactly what the CEO of BlackRock said. And people don't realize how big BlackRock is. You know, the story of Wall Street is the two
a trillion in assets,
a trillion asset, and of course their competition Blackstone, which is much smaller but still makes waves in the market. You know, it's the letter was called A Sense of Purpose. What is that sense of purpose?
I think what he means by a sense of purpose, and what others have talked about, is that for a long time on Wall Street, it's been a focus really not only on short-term gains, meaning the quarterly report is everything, but shareholder value in the sense that there's a huge divorce between the shareholder as an entity, as you think of it as a person,
right,
and the general economy and society. So what the workers need, the purpose of the organization are less important, and any action can be justified merely by saying we did what's best for the value of our shareholders. And I think saying that we need a sense of purpose is taking that conversation into a bigger scope and also now connecting those two things.
I can
agree.
agree.
Shareholder is no different than any one of us. They might have a more direct financial position to the company, but all of us living in society have a stake in how these corporations operate.
Those are powerful words right there, Morgan.
And you have, for our viewers after the show is over, we just showed have a piece online on Bold about this that everyone could read. I love what you're saying about purpose, and I think study after study shows that millennials care about having purpose in their work. You know, that they don't want to just go and make money, that they are
purpose in their investments too.
And their investments in their life. And so how do you think other companies should follow suit? How should other CEOs find purpose in what their businesses are doing?
I think the first thing you need to do is really invest in a long-term strategy. That can't be just a buzzword. That can't be something that's just said to appease those who are interested in corporate social responsibility.
Right.
Because if you have a long-term plan, it makes it easier for you to defend yourself against activist investors. It puts the market at ease as to what you're going to be doing. And then those in investment industries, much like a Larry Fink, you need to incentivize your employees to think in the long term. It's one thing to say that long term matters, but if you're still incentivizing people on short term decisions, nothing will ever change. So corporate CEOs, board members, all of their compensation should be based on perhaps 3, 5, 10-year plans rather than yearly and quarter by quarter benchmarks.
He wrote in this letter, without a sense of purpose, no company, either public or private, can achieve its full potential. But, you know, for our lives, and for your life rather, it's mostly been a focus on short-termism. What can you do for me this quarter? What can you do for me this year? And I feel like a lot of leadership in the private sector is right now. We want results right now. How is that damaging?
It's damaging because it changes, and all these things are cultural things. Like, I would argue that the idea of Wall Street short-termism has infected so many other businesses. Even your conversation about online dating, like, people want things immediately. They're not willing to kind of think about a long-term way in which they want their life to go.
Look at the government. We're looking at that the government may shut down at the end of the week because we're funding the government based on like 4-week extensions. The largest economy in the world.
Great idea. Not.
Again, it's a short-term concept that we're always rolling problems over to the next time. And I don't think that's an effective way to run a government or run a business or run a society.
Kicking the can down the road. We all have committed that sin.
But by the way, what's a cultural anthropologist?
Oh, a cultural...
That sounds so cool, and I'd like to call myself one.
Go for it. No. It's a title that's open to anyone. But really, as a cultural anthropologist, what I do is I work with organizations of all different kinds to basically help understand culture.
Interesting.
And find things that they might not be able to discern on the surface. So it's about going a little bit deeper and connect things that are unseen. I call it invisible dots.
Is it American to be focused on the short term?
That's certainly...
that's a question for our resident cultural anthropologist here.
I don't necessarily think so. For example, using a cultural anthropology trick, something that you wouldn't think about right now. We all live in New York City, or we spend a lot of time here.
Yeah.
When I spend time in places like Central Park and Prospect Park, there are huge projects that people planned well over 100 years ago that we all now sit here and enjoy. And I think we need to go back to that sort of thinking, to do things for the greater good that, yeah, I'm sure 100 years ago that could have been, nowadays that would be condos and co-ops. But there's something to be said for having green space, sustainable spaces in our city. And we need to go back to that kind of thinking. So I don't think
we need to think big again. We need to think big
short term
and long term. Well, Philip McKenzie, cultural anthropologist, I'm stuttering while saying it, and strategist. Thank you so much for your wise words.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're so interesting. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, guys.
Morgan, why don't you take on this one? She's your friend.
Yay! You guys are going to have so much fun. This is Hagar Jamali, who is the founder and CEO of Greenwich Media Strategies. Hagar has held numerous positions, senior positions in public affairs and policymaking positions in the U.S. government over the course of the last 12 years. And, you know, secret note here, she worked with me in some of those. These positions have helped shape her professional background and experience. And you probably recognize her. She's all over the television on the cable news network. So, Hagar Jamali.
Thank you for having me. I'm really honored to be here, you guys.
It's amazing to have you here. It would be impossible to share your whole resume of what you've done over the last 12 years.
It's quite impressive.
But,
just a short conversation I had with her was
Senior at the White
insane.
House,
Thank you.
senior at the Treasury Department, spokesperson for the UN ambassador. I mean, and beautiful, and two beautiful kids, annoying. And now, but interesting.
She has it all.
For bold business, what's interesting is that she decided to leave government and take the plunge and not go to a big corporation, but instead to start her own business. So, Hagar, we have so many millennials watching today who are in startups or thinking about starting their own business. How did you make the jump and the transition from a highly successful government career to starting your own business?
So honestly, it started out, my idea was more to have a couple clients on the side. I had just had my second child. I wanted flexibility, and I figure, and there were many things I wanted to dive into. And as you know, when you're in government, you really only work in government. You can't wear many hats.
Right.
And so I wanted to wear many hats. I wanted to do the commentating thing. I wanted to join different efforts. So I figured I would get a couple clients on the side, and what I didn't expect is that when I would start my business, I fell in love with it. So I fell in love with the business development side of it, with trying to find new avenues to pursue, different people to partner with. It's been really exciting. But so what I would tell millennials thinking about that is, what I have found since I started is that a lot of people now work for themselves. They find that they can do what they would normally do for a corporation, but because of the digital world, because of websites, because of simple networking, they're able to consult directly. And a lot of businesses seem to prefer it because it's probably cheaper for them than to hire within.
So, and one of the things, David, that I think is important about Hagar's story is that she didn't leave college and say, I'm going to start my own business. She had a long career in government and then did it. So I don't think we can really be defined by what we think we're going to do forever, right? Like, be open. You can have a really successful career in one sector and then jump to another.
I think what was really interesting, Hagar, what we discussed before the show, is all the experience you brought from having a government job. Can you talk a little bit about that?
That's true. And one of the things I tell people often is to make sure to do their time, to put their head down and work really hard and take whatever project is thrown at them and know that they'll reap the benefits much later. So my business, I will say for sure, I've reaped the benefits of that. For the 12 years I was in government, I focused in on Middle East foreign policy making.
Not easy.
No, it was not.
Not easy.
No, still not. And specifically counter illicit finance and sanctions policy, which really ended up chartering the course of my career. And then from there, I moved into communications, and my current business marries the two. So I find that the experience I have in that, in understanding policy and substance, and then having the knack for communications and the people skills for that. And I cannot stress enough the importance of people skills.
It still matters, Hagar?
Yeah.
Because a lot of, it's this. It's just like, oh, hello.
It is. But my dad, who is a very successful businessman and has trained me with his business principles. And again, I didn't think I would go into business. And then when I did, he's somebody I sought a lot of advice from. He always used to tell me how far taking somebody out for coffee or lunch would go. And it's true. I still pursue that to this day.
Everyone likes to be fed.
Yes, that's right.
But I have a question. So we were just talking to our last guest, Philip, about purpose and about what BlackRock CEO wrote about this. How do you find purpose in your own business? You are a startup, a successful startup. What are the guiding principles that you have when you created your business, and how do you find purpose in what you're doing now?
That's a great question, actually. It's one of the things I pride myself on is having a set of clients that I'm personally proud of, that I'm personally vested in, that I want to help promote, and I want to see their businesses or their banks or foreign policies succeed. To be personally involved in that, to want to promote that, I think makes my business a bit more successful. I won't just take any client. I find I say no more often than I say yes. I certainly won't take shady clients. When you've worked in counter illicit finance, you can imagine you get some coming your way. I want to personally be, personally this. So I don't take a shady client. I love my clients, but also I pursue my business with a set of ethics and honesty and transparency that, when you work in business and you meet other business people, you see those who do that and those who don't. Yeah. And so it makes me fight more for being honest, being transparent, working with friends, promoting friends. It's been very helpful for me in my business.
So Hagar, we're running out of time, but I want you to give your advice to people who want to start their own business, or maybe they're just starting out their careers and are interested in government, either or.
So I have a lot, but let's narrow it down to 3. I would say, first and foremost, like I mentioned, do your time. Don't be entitled. Don't be afraid to raise your hand. That's a big one lately. It's a big one lately. Don't be afraid to raise your hand for that project. All that, doing your time will pay off later. The second is, people skills and networking. Right. I am friends with almost every single boss I've ever had. That has paid off. Every contact I ever had in government, every friend like Morgan, who's helped bring me on the show today. And so that has also paid off in spades. Yeah.
And there was a third.
Yes, there was a third. The third I would say is to do what makes you happy, to follow what you are inspired by, what motivates you, what gets you up in the morning and makes you really excited. Everybody will achieve success if you're doing what you're happy.
That's great. That's great advice. Someone told me that, as a teenager, the money will follow if you're happy.
It's true.
Anytime that I pursued money over, wanting to get a business deal over what I thought would really make me happy, I was miserable.
I agree. And it gives me one final point, and that's just that if somebody now were to come to me with a job that pays more, I probably wouldn't take it, because the flexibility I have with the business and allowing me to be the mom I want to be with my kids is priceless.
Hagar Kamali, powerful words. Thank you so much for joining us
Thanks
this morning.
for having me.
Thanks, Hagar. Our next guest is Larry Sharpe, a former teacher, businessman, Marine Corps vet, go Marines, and also a native New Yorker. He is the 2018 Libertarian candidate for New York State Governor and is here to discuss entrepreneurship and jobs for the African American community. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So there's so many millennials that I think are attracted to the libertarian message. Tell us why.
Because we're super cool.
Yeah, but tell us, what is it about entrepreneurships and jobs that leads you to being a libertarian? How do you tie it all together?
The issue here we're finding is what's tearing us up, or what's making disruption in our nation right now, is actually technology. Mm-hmm. It's easy. If you're on the left, you blame big corporations. If you're on the right, you blame immigrants. Those are minor. The biggest thing is technology. 2 of the biggest jobs that we have in the United States is driver and server/clerk. And you've already seen driverless cars are coming. You've already seen the kiosks. It's already happening, right? So you add all of that together and you have a lot of disruption. How do you handle that? Well, the problem is government cannot be the answer. Government tries to fight technology. It does it all the time. We fought Uber, right? We fight Airbnb. Government fights it because it's status quo. People are saying it doesn't work. You add on top of that the idea that up to 40% of all Americans at one point coming up here in the next couple of years are going to somehow not be a traditional employee. The idea of you having, I have a job that's going to go for 20 years, this is a fantasy now. It hardly ever happens unless you fall into government, academia, or some large organizations. I just did a talk at Columbia's high school prep school, right? Hi, Haley, if you see me. So yes, hi, Haley. And I told them about the same thing, and that is, look, the average person nowadays, particularly a youngster, they're going to have at least 5 careers. Not 5 jobs.
Oh, more.
At least. That's correct.
More for Morgan.
I've got 30 years in high school students, and I've had 5. So they're going to have at least 5 careers. It changes everything. The entrepreneurial spirit is the only way you can make that happen. Right. That's the idea of not deciding, I'm going to learn something so well that I'm amazing at it, because that goes away in 5 or 10 years. Not just that a computer takes that job. Data, while valuable, computers do it well. In fact, even managing, computers do well. Leading, computers don't do well. And entrepreneurship is all about leading, and that's the key.
So Larry and I were talking about something super interesting right when he came in, that millennials consider capitalism to be a bad word.
Yes.
How do we get there, Larry?
Absolutely,
How did this
yes.
happen? Because we live in one of the most vibrant economies in the world.
Because most of us are fooled into believing that crony capitalism is actual capitalism. It isn't. Right? Very often we say, well, let's open this market up, let's open this market up. But let's have government regulate it so much to where it's not really open anymore. And a good example of this for the African American community is licensing. Right? We have tons of licensing issues in New York State.
Especially at the local and state level,
Yes.
everywhere.
There's a license to braid hair. Right?
Really?
Now, yes.
And for florists.
To walk a dog.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm not joking. These are things that we have. Now, here's a problem. If you're wealthy, who cares? If you're poor, or worse, if you have a criminal record, you can't get a job, you can't start a... How can you... How
So
can you get...
the licensing issues like disincentivizes
Yes.
people of color and poorer people.
Anyone who's in trouble is going to suffer from a license. And here's a good rule on licensing. Very simple rule you should be thinking about. Would you ask your friend to do it? Would you ask your friend to walk a dog or braid your hair?
Sure.
Why is there a license?
Can I braid your hair?
Would you
You
ask?
can. It's
There
not
we
very
go.
long, but you know.
Yes, no license required. But would you ask your friend to say, take out your gallbladder?
No.
No. Let's get a license for that. How about, that's a good general rule in what New York should be doing and what the whole country should be doing. Licensing often isn't even at all for safety. The vaping industry is a good example here in New York. We have licensing now for vape shops. Yes. Why? Now, if you were telling me that the license was because they need to learn something or have some kind of qualification, okay, maybe that makes sense. Like a driver's license, I get it. You have to have testing, you have to have an eye test, driver's test. I'm okay with that. The licensing for vaping right now is just to control the number of vape shops. All you have to do is apply. There's nothing that has to be done. It is simply unnecessarily government control. Why wouldn't you let the consumers decide? Let a consumer decide. If the consumers want the vape shop, they'll buy it. If they don't, they won't.
Well, we also have an overly litigious society as well
Absolutely.
that I think completely
We're all
contributes to
suing
it.
each other. aren't we?
Absolutely. Yes.
But we talk about this every Tuesday on this show.